Ladies and gentlemen, Geri Petito.
I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. And in time, this too shall pass. I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. Geri Petito taught the class. I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. Loves the answer, the greener grass. I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. One day at a time, free at last.
When you don't know just what to do.
Just what to do, just what to do.
If what you're feeling is really true.
Is it really true? Is it really true?
Just keep your ideas safe and sound.
Safe and sound, safe and sound.
That's exactly how change is found.
Change is found, change is found. I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. And in time, this too shall pass. I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. Geri Petito taught the class. I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. Loves the answer, the greener grass. I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. One day at a time, free at last.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Geri Petitos Show on Hamilton Radio. Guys, everyone, and anyone out there who knows me knows I am the author of I'm Not an Addict, I'm Just an Ass. I'd rather be a smartass than a dumbass, guys, because almost 32 years ago, I was a dumbass. But through the grace of God, 32 years later, I can honestly say now I'm a smartass. Yes, the word ass is in the Bible at least 30 times, and it means donkey, and that's what I was. So I'm saying all that to say this, guys. We've all had a very rough 3 years all over the world, not just here. Okay? Some have made it and some unfortunately have not, even friends and family members of mine. But I'm here to let everyone know that I don't want you to feel like you don't have someone to talk to. I'm a nutritional health coach. I'm also a recovery coach. So all my services to you are free. Please, please reach out. If anyone thinks my book can help them or a friend or a family member, because I do, you can go to Simon & Schuster's bookstore, Archway Publishing. You can go on Barnes & Noble's, BAM, Google. It's everywhere. Amazon. Just Google the name. Guys, if someone out there truly, truly, truly cannot afford my book, please reach out to me about that as well. Please go to my website, www.geripetito.com. All my pages are there. You could even order the book through that. And also go to the Geri Petito Show YouTube channel. A lot of incredible things are happening. Having said that, I have a really, really cool guest with me today. Okay, and she rocks the mic. Christine Vitale, say hello to everyone.
Hey, good afternoon, good evening, good whatever time of the day it is at the time that you're seeing this. Thank you, Geri, for inviting me here. I'm so excited to have a copy of this book.
Awesome.
I'm sure I'm going to be helped from it. I didn't necessarily have some of the issues that you're addressing in here, but I'm sure I could be helped from the book just the same.
Thank you for that. I just want to touch base on that real quick, and then we'll get into your whole story. First of all, this lady and I are swapping interviews. She already interviewed me. It was amazing. I just love this lady right here. And she honored me with that interview, and she honors me today being here as well. But as far as my book goes and with addiction, it's not just for drugs, guys. It's for everything and anything. It could be gambling, it could be sex, food, right, whatever. It's all the same. So this can help anyone out there with any kind of issues they're struggling with at all. Okay, so I just wanted to say that. So tell everyone a little bit about you.
My name is Christine Vitale, or you can say Vitale, or you could say Vitale, whatever you want to say, because it's all correct. It just is a matter of the pronunciation. I grew up saying Vitale, but I notice, I'm less inclined to say that now than I was when I was growing up. I guess my family took on an Americanized pronunciation, but I'm here because I have had a history in radio, and if it weren't for that fact, I probably wouldn't be here right now. So I guess that's really where we're going with this.
Yes.
I began in radio as part of a job I had accepted. I had accepted a position with the United in Group Harmony Association, which was an organization that was nonprofit. It was founded in 1976, and it worked to preserve and expose the public in the vocal group, expose them to vocal group music, which is, some people commonly call it doo-wop.
I love that. Go ahead.
And we do cover that. It does cover that, but it has encompassed the roots that went back earlier and also moved on later into more soulful sounds as music began evolving into the soul group era. So it's mainly mainly the 1940s through the 60s that they consider the roots of vocal group music with respect to this organization. Now, I know that on a much deeper level, it could be traced back to the African diaspora, but that's not exactly what led me to be on radio. It was my involvement with this organization that covered the 1940s through the 60s in the American tradition, typical American tradition. Even though I know that, and I've been corrected and people have criticized, that is not all there is to vocal group music. Yes, I do know. I know that there's more to the history, but I'm not the one who created the organization, but this is how I got into radio. And I do cover more than just the 1940s through the 60s sometimes. I mean, I center my music on the late 40s, early 50s mostly, but I'll go beyond and I'll go before.
Okay, I have to interrupt you. I don't like interrupting my guests, but I have to. So are we allowed to ask your age? There's a reason why.
You could. I mean, I don't usually talk about it because people still think I'm 20-something years old.
Because you look it. So I'm 61. And give me an idea.
Well, I've been in this music for more than half my life, and I'm just a few years younger than you are.
Okay, so the reason I'm asking is this. I have a lot of listeners that listen to my shows because of the music. So they're going to be listening to this one. And the reason I'm asking is this. We were born too late. Like, I always feel like, even me, and I'm 61 years old, and I say this on a lot of shows when we talk about music, that I love oldies, doo-wop, and Elvis, okay? And if we really think about it, this music came out way before us. So how on earth did you get into this? Like, how did you love this music?
Well, can I just ask, can I adjust this mic slightly?
Sure.
Okay, because...
You can put it anywhere you need to put it.
This would be better, like for my posture and...
Perfect.
You know, overall
health. Yes, absolutely.
Okay. I hope it's okay with the camera.
It's
all
fine.
Right. I did not grow up listening to vocal groups. I grew up in my earliest years, I was listening to hard rock mostly, and the kind of stuff that was popular, 60s harder rocking music, early 70s.
Led Zeppelin and all that?
Yes, and many more.
Yes.
And that's what I first started to listen to because I was a young child. And in the lineage of my family, I'm the second to last child, and my mother actually had 10 children, and I was 9th of 10.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot. So I had exposure to music that, you know, of much older siblings. But they weren't listening to vocal groups. They were listening to this hard rock stuff, acid, trippy stuff, and I liked that. David Bowie,
sure.
Pink Floyd, Black
Sabbath.
Sabbath.
I love Pink Floyd.
Led Zeppelin, of course, and many others, and it kept expanding. Then
Jethro Tull?
Yes, and I became a huge Kiss fan.
Okay.
All right, but fast forward, I started to become very interested in Elvis Presley.
Honey, I love you more. Continue.
And as I became interested in Elvis Presley, I began reading about the history of where a lot of the music that he covered came from, which led me to discover vocal groups. And I am the kind of person that when I become interested in something, sometimes I take a superficial interest, but sometimes I take a deep dive. And when I take a deep dive, I just keep digging. I want to know where this came from. Now, where did this come from? And I keep tracing back, and I want to know. And that's what led me to vocal groups, because I know that he covered spiritual music and he covered a lot of early rhythm and blues music. And then I became fixated on the vocal group sound, which I loved, because instead of just hearing one voice, now I learned the joys of hearing 4 and 5 part harmony. Beautiful. And that was like, you know, a really full sound with a really fat bottom if you had a good bass, and a high tenor, a floating tenor, and I just became immersed in vocal group music. And through the organization, the United in Group Harmony Association, which served as an educational organization that would foster wider recognition and greater appreciation for this roots music, I just had the opportunity to learn from some of the people who had been collecting it for years, who taught me a lot. And as I was given this position to work for United in Group Harmony Association, it came with a co-host position on radio for first WNWK in New York City, then WMYE in New York City's Board of Education, where, United in Group Harmony Association, or UGHA, as they called it.
That's right, UGHA, right.
Was the underwriter for this show that featured this music. And my interest just kept growing and growing, and working for the organization and starting to have to write up things because it was related to a record label, Clifton Records, a music store, Clifton Music, and it put out a newsletter, gave me writing opportunities. Well, I couldn't write about things I didn't know about, so I had to learn and research and read, and I just read everything I can get my hands on, talked to a lot of people who collected the music and who were writers in this music, and that's how my interest just grew. And then when I, a few years later, went to a university for employment, I left that position at United in Group Harmony Association. I went to a university for employment. I landed on the university's radio station as a side position to what I was doing in more integral to the university operations. And I wanted to be on radio and continue with the mission, because for me, it felt like, I won't call it a burden, a cross to bear, in a way, to carry forward the mission of the United in Group Harmony Association to the best of my ability, because I truly believe in it in my heart, that this is a genre that has deserved greater recognition. After all, it doesn't even have, or never has had, a category in the Grammys. And on any documentary that documents American music, most of the time, vocal groups are a blip on the radar of what they cover. They cover rock and roll, they say Chuck Berry, they say Elvis Presley, of course. They say Little Richard. And there's others that they might acknowledge. But the vocal groups just pop up like that, and they're gone. Blink, and you're gone. So this genre needs to be more fully recognized. And what I've noticed over the years is that not I've noticed this only, but over the years and throughout the decades, it became to be looked at more and more as novelty and treated more like a very kitschy type of novelty form of music, not something to be taken more seriously. And you see, I want to take it seriously, and I want to get people to appreciate it on that level. So, and not to sound disparaging to anybody, but, Sha Na Na, for example, did a lot to help popularize this genre, especially around the time of Woodstock, where it was seemingly unfashionable to be into vocal groups. They put in their effort to at least keep a presence there. But then they got their own TV show, which became more and more kind of like novelty, silly, and the music was taken less seriously and looked more as stereotypical imagery that Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley and American Hot Wax capitalized on that. And that, I think, served overall to diminish the value of the worth of this music, the worth in the roots of it, because it became more like, people would just say, oh, doo-wop, 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 doo-wop. They would think of imagery that they would associate with those TV shows and that movie. And it's so much more, so much more.
It's so much more.
Yeah, and I get into the depths of it, the roots of it, which actually has little to do with those types of images. Gold lame suits and slicked back hair, that's commercial, that's the commercial scratching the surface of it for some people. That's not really the memories of a lot of the people who created this music.
Well, I want to just say something about what you said, because you articulated that perfectly, okay? I remember growing up, of course, Happy Days. I mean, we loved it. It was Laverne and Shirley, right? Okay. Our schools did a lot of dances, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, and they were all 50s dances because of that. So that part I'm happy about. But I've interviewed so many incredible legends, Larry Chance from the Earls, Mel Carr, I mean, right, on and on and on. And I got to interview Charlie Colello this week. And forget it, I mean, the guy's brilliant, the most brilliant man with everything, all this, right? But here's what's interesting. You know, I've interviewed a lot of young up-and-coming artists, okay, indie artists, young singers, as young as 9 years old. I ask every one of them a similar question. Who influenced you? Do you know that the majority of them all say these legends? And that's beautiful, because they say if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't be doing what we're doing.
And it's probably because they had exposure from older siblings or their parents or other older relatives. Yep. And yeah, it's good to have had that. I didn't have that kind of exposure when I was growing up. Right. I heard, I was hearing some of this music on radio, but it was never my family's choice. It was kind of like background music to me. Like maybe they'd change the dial on the radio and then there'd be this doo-wop station. And I'd even hear one of my older sisters saying, not that doo-wop crap, please, get rid of that. It's so corny. It's so corny. And as a child, I thought, oh, that's corny, because, I listened to older siblings. But then as I started to listen to it more on my own, it appealed to me a little bit more, but it was still background music until I started to research it. Then when I began to research it, and then when I started working with the United in Group Harmony Association, I learned so much more that I kind of forget about those images on happy days, and I'm not denouncing it. I'm just saying that I don't even think about that kind of imagery when I think of this music. And then I find that so many people now, because of those images, only think of that, and that's where their interest ends. And because of that, they think of it as something novelty, because the music has been used as novelty music. In fact, it has so often been used to create children's music. Like
yes, my granddaughter's 7. Yes.
Yeah, and so they make versions of vocal group stuff that's centered on children, and as good as that may be, on one hand, on the other hand, it serves to cheapen the genre. So I like that's there, but you have to kind of counter that and create some balance to let people know, wait a second, this is actually a musical art form to which there really is a lot of depth. And a very high price was paid by a lot of singers to have this music. And I think it needs to be treated with a higher level of respect. So
I agree
to
with
that
that
extent
part.
that I can do that, that's what I do. That's what I've done on radio, FM radio, and on now, fast forward to now, I've been doing it lately on Hudson River Radio, at least for now. And I also have my own Twitch channel. So I go on Twitch, twitch.tv/Studio Chatter, I call it. Now, some people say, Studio Chatter, where'd you get that from? Well, when I was started to branch out, I began producing concerts, and I needed to sell tickets, and I needed to come up with a legal business to sell tickets through so I could account for my income properly, and pay taxes accordingly, not just try to be a music show producer, a concert producer, and do it all under the table and try to hide from the government. I'm not doing that. I don't want to get caught. And I just think my conscience needs to be clear, and I need to do it by the book. So I started up a limited liability company. I called it Studio Chatter. And the reason I called it Studio Chatter is because in listening to all of these all these different vocal groups, and as they released more and more material, a lot of the outtakes were released where you could hear the producers talking to the singers about what they wanted. Like you'd hear on an outtake, okay, add a little bit more zest to the way you open that note, or a little bit more, emphasis on that syllable. And I loved hearing that kind of direction because it gave me more insight as to what they were going for when they were producing this music, what they wanted and what they were what they were trying to achieve. So by hearing multiple outtakes of the same song and hearing, them continuing, the groups continuing to get direction, and also sometimes arguing with one another about who's got an off note, it taught me so much more about what this music, what they were aiming for and what they were trying for. So I loved the studio chatter because it gave me another way to learn more about the history of this music. And a lot of that stuff would end up sliced up and gone, but I appreciate hearing it because it gives you so much more context to what they were trying to achieve when recording these sounds. So I always said, I love the studio chatter when you could hear and they're doing like multiple takes. And so when it came time to create a company, a good friend of mine named Tony Smith, who was in many respects my partner in many of my musical ventures, and has been a guiding light to me to working in business in different contexts, and especially from music production and concert production, taught me so much. He said, why don't you call your company Studio Chatter? So I said, that's a great name. I would have never thought of that. And then when it came time now in the summer of 2020, when he called me up on the phone, he said, everything was locked down. He said, what have you been doing lately? I said, well, just, my day job remotely from home. He says, no, musically, what are you doing? I said, nothing. I said, the station I had been on, which was called Area 24 Radio, decided to throw in the towel. So they said, we can't keep things going. So I said, I'm not doing anything. And I was, a little down. My mom had passed away earlier in the year. Thank you. One of the hardest things I've ever had to deal with and still struggle very much with every single day, without a doubt. I wasn't doing anything, so he got me started on Twitch because a lot of DJs suddenly went on Twitch. Twitch was a gaming platform primarily for gamers. I have no interest in video gaming. I didn't even know about Twitch. He taught me about it. He said, you got to come on to Twitch. I said, I saw you on social media doing something. I'm thinking, what is this Twitch stuff? And I still didn't know anything about it, but he came over, he set me up, he taught me all about it little by little so I could understand the Twitch mentality, because this was like learning to speak a new language for me. I wasn't from this state of mind.
Right.
And so I got going on Twitch myself. So twitch.tv/studio chatter. Because I figured people make money on Twitch. So if I'm going to make money, if somebody's going to, if I ever can propel my Twitch channel to start, generating an income source for me, I need to channel it through my business. I might as well call it Studio Chatter. After all, that's the business that I promote.
Right.
Yeah.
I love that.
And thank you. I worked, started out as primarily a concert production company and a booking agency. So I book bands. And when I say bands, I'm not really booking vocal group stuff, to be honest. I'm booking the club scene. I was booking for a long time municipalities, their summer concert series, and some of their civic organizations within different towns. They would call on me because I made enough connections. But after our lockdown, I seem to have lost most of those connections, but I am hoping to get them back because I was able to provide an assortment, a variety of different bands, not all hinging on oldies, but a mix. In talking with whoever ran usually the recreation department or some component within the government of a given city, talking with them about how I could provide for them a mosaic of different types of sounds that would appeal to the kinds of townspeople, nothing too extreme, but different types of sounds. Like some bands would have a certain type of flavor, like maybe a little bit more of a Latin sound, maybe something more like hinging on swing music, but maybe by a contemporary group that takes standard swing stuff and puts a little bit of a modern edge on it so that younger people think it's cool, older people think it's cool, everybody loves it. And so stuff that would not offend anybody, because we also know how hypersensitive people are, but nothing too extreme, and a variety, a mosaic of sounds to get them through their 10-week municipal summer concert series usually. And then from that, people would call on me, like if I run this organization in town, I run that organization in town, I'm in charge of the senior group, can you provide me with a band? And so yes, it grew from there. And I would book, a variety of these bands. And now, more or less, I'm booking a local Irish pub near me.
Okay,
and
very
occasionally some other types of more private things with the same types of variety of sounds. Some of it's, like 70s-ish rock. Some of it's 60s-ish rock. Some of it stems, from the 50s through, let's say, the 90s. But it's nothing that's strictly doo-wop, because in my view, there's not enough to work with there and not enough to sustain the business of an Irish pub, and where the monetary asking matches.
Right.
Everything has to align properly.
Sure. So I have a question for you.
I hope you have many,
Okay.
because I could use a break in talking. It's hard to shut me up. You got to tell me to put a cork in
But
it.
see, I don't want to shut you up, okay? Because this is why we're here.
Okay.
Everyone listening is going to really benefit from everything you're saying about the music, because we don't get a lot of that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I love your knowledge about this. So, but I do have a couple personal silly questions for you. So your siblings, with everything you've done now with the music and doo-wop, your relationship with doo-wop, how do they feel now about it? Do they still not like the music, or did that change?
I think they're indifferent to it. To be honest, I don't really have close family relationships anymore, so they don't say much. They haven't said very much, but it's some of them I know think, oh, that old doo-wop music.
Okay.
And some of them think, oh, she works in this music. That's good. Like some of
Okay.
them have changed their minds
Okay.
a bit, but I have no real close ties
Okay.
with any one of my family members, unfortunately.
Sorry
but-
to hear that. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so now, have you met anyone that really impacted your life in the music industry?
Oh, many.
Okay.
So many.
So let's hear a few.
Okay, Eugene Pitt from the Jive
Very
Five.
cool.
He was very, very, very progressive in his thinking. He wrote songs beautifully. He had a certain charismatic style on stage and with his voice, and his songwriting fit what he was capable of doing on stage so perfectly. And he had such a positive outlook on life. Like the world was a beautiful place to him. He didn't see negativity. And his songwriting continued to evolve, and I really respected that about him. I've met many. I haven't liked them all equally, but I usually would get something from
Okay.
each one of them, be it good or bad, or something like how to think, how not to think, how to do business, how not to do business. I won't say that every single one of these artists over the years were all a pleasure to do business with, but I've met quite a few, and Eugene Pitt struck me in a most positive manner. In fact, when we first met, we didn't get off on the right foot. We didn't. And then we got to know each other, and we learned each other is really cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think
So
you're
that-
very
yes,
cool.
it was a first misstep from just coming from a lack of familiarity. He didn't know who I was. I didn't really know him well enough. I thought he was, and I was new in my position. So we didn't get off on the right foot, but we quickly fixed that and had many years of a great friendship.
Okay, so now, was there anyone in particular that you wish you could have met but never got a chance to?
Oh, numerous individuals. I would have liked to have met Jimmy Ricks from the Ravens, Maith Marshall from the Ravens, but
cool.
both of them had passed on before I could meet them. I did meet Pookie Hudson from the Spaniels,
Very
and
cool.
yeah, and I met most of the original Spaniels, and they were all really fun. In fact, part of my job entailed my having to drive people around and pick them up at the airport. So we had some great. And take them to their hotels and bring them from the hotels to the show. So we were able to have some great conversations. The Eldorados, Perkle Lee Moses Jr., and, the song At My Front Door, which people often call Crazy Little Mama.
Okay, that's funny,
Yeah.
yes.
So there was that. Excuse me. Pardon me. But there were so many. I sometimes would find it disappointing that they wouldn't have more passion for what we respected. Like I was head over heels for Ray Pollard of the Wanderers.
Oh, yes.
And when I met him, I felt, why aren't you happier? Or why aren't you more happy to have people who are like throwing themselves at you like this? And then I learned, of course, throughout the years, I learned some artists are not as thrilled. They often look at you with some skepticism, like you're making more money off of my music than I ever made, and you're paying me to do this one little gig, a pittance compared to what I should be getting. So there was often some degree of skepticism, which made not all of this that much fun all the time. Not every single singer viewed their work and the work of the United in Group Harmony Association as a favorable thing to do that's positive for the music. They looked at it often as, I never got my just due, and I'm here to do this job, but you're really not paying me my full worth, and what more can you do for me besides just this one gig? So there was a lot of that, to be honest. I loved these groups' music. I didn't always love their personalities equally, but I would usually find something pleasant in each one, at least for that moment, a tidbit here, a tidbit there. They always had something to say, or they would let out some notes and start singing, and I'd say, that's that voice I love on these recordings, so I would look for the positive in it. It wasn't all roses, but
Okay.
it was certainly enough to learn from them what I could appreciate about them.
So I've experienced the opposite end of that. Okay, something a little different. Because at this stage, a lot of them are up there now. We've lost a lot of them. Okay, but the ones that are still with us, I can't be more honored, to have met them and interviewed them. And they're just so grateful that they're still being remembered and recognized. So I've experienced the better part of that. But I understand what you're saying. I could imagine.
Yeah, there have been some who seemed like Eugene Pitt seemed to love the world. Okay, that was great. There are some others whose personality and charm on the stage I loved, but when I would have private discussions with them, especially about money, it wasn't all
It was different.
charming, but, and I'm not saying I can't understand that. I actually can deal with that reality.
Okay.
I can separate the two. I'm not saying there's something wrong with it.
Right, I
It's
understand.
actually quite understandable. I had the image of their music and their stage presence before getting to know them. That was one thing, and then getting to know some of them was another. But a lot of the ones that I met and that I was really enamored with are long gone. Even if they only had
A one-hit wonder.
yeah, or not even a one-hit wonder. Like, for example, I loved this person named Cleo Perry and the Inspirators. And you might say, well, I don't know who he was. I didn't know who he was either, but we learned that he was still around and in Brooklyn. We booked him. He was the most lovable, exciting person with a huge voice, and he was a joy to know. And he loved coming into the scene of the organization, see all these concerts that we were putting together. And he even said, I never even knew of all of these groups. And he loved every bit of it. That's somebody who was filled with passion. And then we booked him again. Well, we booked him a few times, but we booked him one more time. And it was getting close to the show, and we hadn't heard anything. It's like, uh-oh, we better check on him. And then we learned he had passed away suddenly. Yeah, so this kind of thing would happen often.
Right.
And the United in Group Harmony Association didn't focus on booking the most major names because they didn't have the budget to pay the big bucks that lots of people wanted. So, for example, it was, we would be asked, why aren't you booking Johnny Maestro and the Brooklyn Bridge? Why aren't you booking Little Anthony and the Imperials? Those guys, they demand a lot of money. Because you have to really be in demand to demand, and they were in demand. So they demanded a lot of money. It's out of budget. The whole premise of the United in Group Harmony Association was to foster wider recognition for the underserved side. So it really started out as a hardcore collectors organization that really gave credence to the underdog, the groups that never had the chance to have these big names and who could work for big bucks like that. Johnny Maestro asked for a lot of money. The Duprees, Little Anthony, for example. These are some that came to mind. I'm trying to think of some others, but a lot of them have definitely gone, even by the wayside, even ones who were asking for a fair amount of money compared to some of these others who were more obscure, who didn't have those charted hits, and who didn't have the value of their records being distributed widely, even if they were on an underground label. So the whole point was to give exposure to the underexposed side, not really to be booking famous names. Plenty of commercial concerts were doing that already. Our purpose was the underexplored side.
I love that, though. That's something beautiful.
And it was very heartfelt. I mean, that's what led me down the path toward very deeper and deeper and deeper, more obscure music. And that's what separates the United in Group Harmony Association and Ronnie Italiano, who was its founder and president, from all these commercial producers. And it's nothing against these commercial concerts that people were producing. It's just that they didn't need more of that. We needed to give exposure to so many of the singers who were around and throughout the 70s and the 80s who weren't being given a chance. And as long as these singers were still around, it started out that just a group of core collectors would come out and see them. And it just kept getting bigger and bigger throughout the years. And it got, I won't say huge, but let's just say it was sizable. And it sustained itself from 1976 until 2008 when the president passed away, and then the organization was gradually dissolved through, it was a nonprofit, tax-exempt organization, had to be dissolved by the books. And so there were some overseers who took that responsibility and dissolved the organization.
Interesting. So, you just gave me so much information that I'm going to be thinking about for a long time and sharing this, because we don't really think about. All right, I'll give you an example. So as a fan of a lot of these groups and the musicians, right? Mm-hmm. We go to their concerts and we're sitting there and we're like, this is amazing. They sound so great. But we don't really know what goes on behind the scenes, and we don't really know what they are dealing with in the industry either. So that's why you coming on here and talking about all this gives a little light to that. It shines some lightness there because we want to know that. And unfortunately, all right, I'll give you an example. Al Contraire from the Mystics, okay? I'll be having him back in studio again with Lou Rotondo and all that. But when I first interviewed Al years ago, because he wrote a book, okay? The Mob and, okay, the Mystics, the Mob and all that, right?
Yeah.
He talked a lot about, what really went on behind the scenes, and that really opened my eyes. Because here we're thinking, oh my gosh, they're all loaded, they made so much money, half of them didn't even get paid.
Right, there was a very dark side to this.
There's a very dark side, and the mob was heavily involved. I mean, I'm Italian, I wouldn't have thought that,
Right, and I learned that too. Right. I started to realize that as I got into this music, because a lot of the people who were teaching me were of that mentality and associated with a lot of these individuals, and were also bootlegging some of the records.
That's right.
And their reasoning for bootlegging the records, their thought process, their logic, and I do understand this. I understand many perspectives. I don't have to agree with every single perspective. But if we weren't bootlegging these records, hardly anybody would ever have any exposure to them, because not a lot of them were printed up. They didn't generate a lot. So if they made 5,000 copies of a certain record, that was a lot. And over the many years, when people bought this music when it was initially popular, over the years, those records became destroyed. So if somebody would have a copy that's in pretty good condition, they could generate a reproduction. And that would give greater exposure to the music. Now, some of the singers who were around and could see that this was being done with their music were not happy about this. Understandably, just like they weren't happy-go-lucky people in doing a lot of business deals, because they were always leery and very wary of being ripped off. And that was part of the reason why doing business with them was not a happy occasion. I mean, business is not really, it's a very straightforward, matter-of-fact bit of transactions, that we would do, that we would have with these singers, but they always had an air of skepticism more often than not. They felt they were business was not being conducted honestly with them. And
I understand that.
I can understand that too. But then even when they would, this is the part I don't understand, this part. There's parts I understand better than others and agree with better than others. If we say, what would you want? What is your figure? What is your rate? If we were to bring you back with this, put this band behind you and ask you to do these 5 songs, which would be their collector's type material, not the hits, not sing everybody else's hits, sing your records. That's what we had them doing. Not, sing your one song that was a mini hit in your little town and then do a bunch of covers. It was to do your own recordings, because that's what we were giving credence to, their recordings. And they'd give us a figure, but sometimes then they would kind of like show up for the show. They got paid every bit they asked for, but they still seemed unhappy. That was hard to deal with. And I've worked with artists in more contemporary times who did the same thing to me. If you ask me, for
Right.
X amount of dollars, whether it's $1,000 or $3,000, don't show up to the gig unhappy and complain that I'm not paying you enough when you told me, I asked you what your figure was and I gave you precisely what you're asking for. Like, now you're going to be miserable to deal with. I think I can't work with you again. I'm sorry.
I don't understand that either.
If I ask you what is your rate and you tell me X amount of dollars and that's exactly what I have for you, what's the problem? You should have asked for more. Now you show up at the gig, now you're saying, wow, I should have asked for more. She's got a full house here. Well, then ask for more next time. And if I could manage to pay you that, I will. But don't show up being cynical and now very negative toward the whole production, because
Right.
now you're looking at a full house because I did a good job of selling tickets and you realize I should have asked for more money. That's par for the course. That's the nature of the beast. You have to price yourself accordingly. If you feel you're not getting enough, then this was
Right.
the deal. This was our deal. I paid you for that deal. And in the future, well, then maybe you will ask for more.
Interesting.
But one thing you might do is consider being flexible, because if work is scarce, as it was for some of these artists who I have booked over the years, and because I wasn't booking these hardcore vocal group artists, I was booking more contemporary ones that I'm making reference to right now. Some names you might have heard of, but I don't want to name any names. But sometimes these relationships would go sour because they became resentful and bitter when it came to showtime and they would see a big crowd. My job is to fill this house. If I'm doing my job by filling the house and I'm doing my job by paying you exactly what you asked for, well, what's the problem? I asked you your rate. You price yourself accordingly. If you want to negotiate because I think that that's too much money to be paying you because I can't afford it, and you're willing to negotiate, then you settle on a price. You settle on a price. That's the price. That's what we negotiated.
I see it both ways, like you're saying, but again, if they accepted that, I feel exactly the way you feel.
We signed a contract.
Right.
The contract was for the fee that you asked for is exactly what you're getting.
Right.
You had your down payment, maybe sometimes even, another percentage, as more tickets are sold, and then the night of the show, the balance. How can you argue that when you're getting what you asked for?
Right.
That's just business. I mean, there's lots of times where I sell my services as an MC. People hire me to host their concerts and to be a host for a club. Like, there are certain clubs that I used to promote some of their shows. They caught on to that I'm promoting, and I would come and want to give my shows, my radio show at the time, a boost. So I would ask, can I introduce the band? And I would have a method. I would promote the establishment,
Right.
and talk about how great something was. I'd pick out different things, different nights. And some club owners have said to me, you know what, you're going to be our regular MC. And they made a deal with me.
Okay.
So some of them over time, I thought, all I have to do is mention I'm coming to host this show. And a lot of people would show up because back then I did kind of have a popular enough name that I would bring a sizable, if I would say where I was going to be, a fair number of people would show up. And it was obvious that they were coming because not to sound conceited, but I had a very popular show. So they were coming to meet me. I would be able to help the clubs bring people to the door. And I would have a method. I would talk about some aspects of the club restaurant, and I'd pick out different things to keep it interesting, so it wouldn't always be the same spiel. You wouldn't get the same talk every time. It would always be something different. I'd call out the bartenders' names, and I'd say something really personal, which would result in their getting better tips. And I'd talk about the establishment, something favorable all the time, different aspects of it, and how nice the owner is and stuff. Then I would talk about myself, and then I would talk about the band that I was going to be introducing. And I would do all of this in a very short time. They'd come on for their first set. I'd bring them on real big. Then they'd take a break. I'd bring them off the stage. I'd bring them back on the stage, and I'd bring them off the stage. Every time, I would use a moment of opportunity to reiterate who I am, when you could listen to me on the air, and also talk about a different aspect of the club, to get people to say, this is a great place for music, and I want you to come back here. They've got live music each night. Check out this schedule. Look at who they have coming up. And I would really plug the club. And that's how they liked me and gave me more MC work. And so after a while, I started to feel like, oh, I could charge more for myself. I'm getting what I asked for, no complaints. but I could up my figure. Right. But that's on me to do that. I can't make the owner say, you're not paying me enough money, because they're paying me exactly what I asked for. Right. Now I might be hesitant to ask for more, because they might say, that's a little much. But then I could say, okay, well, can you meet me halfway between where we are now and what I'm asking for? Right. I can negotiate. It's up to you to negotiate on your own behalf. You have to be an advocate for yourself. And then you also have to have the common sense to know if somebody isn't willing to pay you what you feel you're worth, then maybe you are asking too much in this forum. Maybe someone else has more money, and maybe you could do both. Maybe you make less here and a little bit more there. You have to know how to be flexible in business. You can't always ask for the same amount. You have to be in demand to demand. And if you can ask politely, if they say no, then I'm afraid it's no. You could choose to walk out, or you could continue to work for the same rate. It's all flexible. The point is, you got to be flexible and know that not everybody's got all of this all the time, and not everybody's going to be willing to pay. And it's up to you to say, do I want to keep doing this? Or am I going to get a better deal in the next town over, because that club is asking me to do this too? And maybe you can do both, as long as you're not compromising, and maybe not the next town over, let's say out of a certain mileage radius, so that you're not harming the business that hired you first. So just like, if you cut hair, right? If you
I had beauty salons. I can't believe you said that.
So you know what I'm talking about then. You don't work at the salon down the block.
No, I had salons in the 80s and 90s.
Okay, and I don't have that, but when I'm getting my hair cut, I often ask, who's ever cutting my hair, what is it like to work in this business? How, and I learned that way. Yeah. So.
And things have changed, guys.
So, I know you don't harm the business. You try to keep things a reasonable distance apart, so that you're not competing with the businesses that you're not serving competing businesses directly head on. You don't want to harm anybody. You're trying to help both.
Right.
Or all.
So, okay. So we still have a few more minutes left. So let me ask you, is there anything that you forgot to talk about that's going on now that you would like to really promote? I mean, what's happening? Is there anything you forgot? Because I don't want you to say, oh, crap, I forgot to say this.
Well, I mean, I would love to talk for a few more hours with you, because there's lots of stuff that I could talk about, and ask you some questions too, because I love what you're doing. But I'm really pushing my presence on Twitch, twitch.tv/studio chatter. I go on Twitch. I hop on Twitch whenever I can. I really need to be better at coming up with a more consistent schedule. But if you go onto Twitch and you click follow, if you want to create an account, if you don't already have one, because a lot of people don't, but you could be an observer of twitch.tv/studio chatter and watch, but you could also create an account which you can then follow me and get a notification every time I take to the stream. And I'm on Hudson River Radio. And they, too, have gone on the way of Twitch, twitch.tv/Hudson River Radio. However, I'm not sure if they have a different a different plan for their future. I
Okay,
think they
okay.
might be changing their business, the way that they do business. So I'm not really certain of the future there. My hope is to stay connected with Hudson River Radio, but I'm not sure what their trajectory is,
Okay.
for their business.
Okay, understandable.
And if I could find anything else, I'm always open to new offers, and I especially like booking. I like booking bands and clubs, and I really want to expand back into municipalities. But in North Jersey, there's kind of a monopoly on most of the North Jersey towns with this one agent.
Oh, wow, okay.
That has, that has clout. And I would like to get some of my business back. I would like to get some of my business back.
I may know that agent.
You probably do. And no harm,
No, I
it's
get
just
it.
that some people are more
I get
connected
it.
and more powerful than I am. I'm
I
a
get it.
single, small operation, but I give good deals because I can do things. I could stretch a budget. I can tell you. That's why people like working with me, those who do. I can really work
That's so
on stretching
great.
a budget.
You're so funny. You are cracking me up right now because I have some things in my head as well. We'll talk after the show.
Okay.
All right. So I would like to read a poem out of my book for you.
Excellent. I love when you do this because I've watched you on more than one occasion, and I heard you on my own show, and you brought me to tears.
So, all right. Do you remember the poem? Because I don't want to read the same poem, but I was reading a poem today called Utilizing Gifts and Talents. Was that one that I read?
I don't think you read that one.
Okay. It was more about like recovery addiction.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to read this one.
Okay.
All right. Now, the reason why I like to read this poem with people in the business is because what you've done, and I want everyone out there to know that everyone is born with a gift and a talent. Everyone. But it's up to us to figure out what that is and to run with it. Okay? So it's not like she's so great because God said, I want to make her great and not you. It's because she figured out what she can be great at. And here she ran with it. All right? So I want everybody out there to know that you have the same opportunity here, okay? Don't get stuck in a rut thinking you're not good enough, because that's not true. So this poem is called Utilizing Gifts and Talents, and it's for all of us.
That's right, because I often feel stuck, and when I'm stuck, I have to look at ways, how can I pivot out of this? How can I pivot to my next move? How can I get some momentum going again? Or how can I improve what I'm presently doing? So the best of us, all of us, it's not just someone who feels depressed who hasn't taken any of their steps. Even if you've taken steps to try to achieve something, there's a lot of slumps. There's a lot of valleys that we fall into, and it's not just if I've accomplished some things in my life, nowhere near what I'd like to accomplish. And I am proud of what I've done, but I'm always looking to say, okay, I'm not growing right now. How can I grow? Either emotionally, business-wise, or I feel stagnant. What can I do to change that? So this can serve anyone's needs. It doesn't even matter.
Beautiful.
It doesn't matter if you're just starting out with a venture, with a project, or something that you're looking to accomplish in your life, or if you've accomplished some of your things on your list. There's always room for growth. So I appreciate this. I don't want to overtake your
beautiful.
time.
Thank you for sharing that, because what you just said is absolutely beautiful, because everyone needed to hear that. So thank you. Utilizing gifts and talents. We are born with talents. We are born with drive, with different gifts to help us thrive. I knew early on I was born to draw and paint, to also write poetry, and to talk without restraint. Our gifts and talents should all be used. God's gift to us not be abused. We can go far in life for sure, using our gifts to go on tour. All our talents should be used to create ourselves and more, but then our job's to share them, to even up the score. You see, in life, what's needed is not just for ourselves. Once our gifts are mastered, take them off the shelves. A living we can make by spreading them around, not just for the money, but to spread a peaceful sound. Don't take for granted the gifts you're given. Go out and spread the joy. Our gifts are not to be held back for us to self-destroy. Put your efforts forth. Do not hesitate, because all your talents, my friend, are never second-rate. Never hold them back or you will surely die. Maybe not in body, but your soul will cry. Our gifts were made to share, our talents made to soar. Go through life enlightened, and then you can roar. Be proud of who you are. Be happy you're alive. Once again, my friend, your gifts will help you thrive. By putting efforts forth, not keeping them at bay, your name, girlfriend, will live forever, forever and a day. Go through life excited for what you sure can give. To yourself and others is our reason to live. Our grave will be quite lonely, but our legacy lives on. Make sure people smile with the breaking dawn. And that's what you're doing. That's what you're doing.
I appreciate hearing those words because it is very inspiring. And I may have done, to some degree, some of this, but there are often times where I do feel I'm coming to, I'm not being as productive as I could. And sometimes I find myself looking, there's got to be a better way to do this. There's got to be a better way to get things going or to start this next venture. And I have to remind myself, there is no one formula to make things happen for yourself. You might wonder, how do I get started? Or how do I get to that next step? There's no one formula except for being present, getting to know people, being humble, being easy to work with, being flexible, approaching people in a way that is not overbearing, that doesn't throw yourself at them like in some big blowhard fashion. You know, being humble goes a long way, but still being assertive and finding that balance, because if you're too assertive, people are going to say, wow, she's so pushy, or he's so pushy, or I can't stand that big blowhard, get him away from me. Other times, you just have to know how to be tactful in your approach and in networking and stay connected with people who are meaningful in life, not just because maybe they could do something for you, but what can you do for them? It's not just, I need to get to know people so I can get ahead. It's more like, I need to build connections and build relationships so that I can start working with people, not for your own self-gain, but where one person can help another. I can help you with that if, you know, and in return, you're helping me with this. And maybe it's not always equal. I may not have as much to offer someone who maybe has a lot more money than I have to produce a big event. Maybe I don't have that, but I do have something else. And maybe I can work out some arrangement that's equitable to both parties or all parties involved and play a role. And maybe I'm not going to, you know, strike it rich, for example, or maybe I'm not going to create wonders, but I am showing the kind of person I am, loyal and true, and I'm there when you need me there, and I'm doing the work that you're asking me to do. I may even go the extra step, because it's what you do that goes beyond expectation that sets you apart from others. So if someone wants you to work with them, give them your all and be humble about it. Don't be demanding or overbearing, you know, and this is how you build relationships with people who can come to realize what the kind of person you are, the kind of character you are, and you work on that from the standpoint of sincerity, loyalty, and that's how things happen. There's no one magic bullet to becoming successful. It's winning people's trust by being present, following through, being able to have discussions that sometimes might be difficult if there's some sort of misunderstanding, like Eugene Pitt and I had. We fixed that like that. It was easy enough to fix it. And if you're working with people who are reasonable, who understand human flaws, you know, you could work on that. And building trust is what's most important. This way, if you have some misunderstandings or you have something that's not clear, it's easy enough to straighten out when you have trust.
Beautifully said. Christine, I want to thank you, sweetheart, it took you over an hour to get here. So first of all, I want to thank you for being here live in studio And I want to thank you for your sincerity with everything that you talked about today and everything you've expressed, because I can see it's from your heart. You've enlightened us with the music industry. You've enlightened us about what goes on behind the scenes with your world as well. And I'm just overwhelmed, and I want to thank you. So this was a pleasure and an honor having you here live in our new studio.
I so appreciate that you would even have me here.
Oh,
you know, I think, what am I worthy of being on the Geri Petito show?
Excuse me, she interviewed me first, so was I worthy of being on Christine's show? See?
And yeah, and I'm glad I learned about you and who you are, so that I could have this talk with you and get to know you. And I'm grateful for the reciprocal.
Let's give a shout out. John Terlizzi.
John Terlizzi.
We love you, man. And he was our connection. John, we love you. And John Terlizzi's now doing a show once a month on Hamilton Radio.
And I've learned that he did make that announcement, and I did see an episode of that. I did see at least a part of one.
Yes. So how cool is that? So John, we love you, and thank you for connecting us.
Yes, thanks, John.
So thank you, girlfriend. This was great. What I'm going to ask now is, Ruben, you're going to take us out, but move your mic, I'll move mine so they can see your beautiful face. There you go. Ruben, take us out, baby.
Ladies and gentlemen, Geri Petito.
I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. And in time, this too shall pass. I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. Geri Petito taught the class. I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. Loves the answer, the greener grass. I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. One day at a time, free at last.
When you don't know just what to do.
Just what to do, just what to do.
If what you're feeling is really true.
Is it really true? Is it really true?
Just keep your ideas safe and sound.
Safe and sound, safe and sound.
That's exactly how change is found.
Change is found, change is found. I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. And in time, this too shall pass. I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. Geri Petito taught the class. I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. Loves the answer, the greener grass. I'm not an addict, I'm just an ass. One day at a time, free at last.